farewell address in Chicago as opposed to the more traditional practice of doing it in the Oval Office or here in the This is Chicago's where it all started. So I'll be thinking back to being a young community organizer, pretty much fresh out of school, and feeling as if my faith in America's ability to bring about change and our democracy has been vindicated. The two things I take away from this office are, number one, that change can happen, that the system will respond to ordinary people coming together to try to move the country in a better direction. And the second thing I'll take away from this experience is the fundamental goodness of the American people, all of whom are pouring their heart and soul into making their communities work better, supporting their families, moving this country forward, keeping us safe. It gives you a lot of confidence about our prospects for the future.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Today's guests, Clemson Brown, Leroy Baylor, and of course, Graham Witherspoon. And I want to give a shout out to Leroy. Brother Leroy's birthday's today.
Happy birthday.
Mine is in 2 days.
Praise be
brother,
to God.
that's truly a brother, 2 days apart, right?
Yes, indeed.
But what do you think about seeing our real president, a Class A act at his farewell to everybody? Now everybody's wishing he was back, and we've got this clown in the White House that's tried to destroy every good thing he did. Every good thing he did. The backlash of racism.
Personified.
That's exactly what it is, you know. What say ye, Brother Leroy, on your birthday?
Well, I tell you, I've had points of view regarding President Obama, and they would call him Obama, and they would call his wife Michelle. He's looking better every day. Every day that this guy in office focuses on, pardon me, eliminating anything attached to President Obama. I don't take it as Obama the person, I take it as black people having been in the White House.
Right, exactly.
I don't look at it as a personality, and we would be wrong if we did that. This guy, he has this kind of, you would see it in these Rosewood.
Yeah.
The movie Rosewood. The black guy has a piano on the other side of town, and the southerner Caucasian says, yeah, Moses got a piano. And then his partner says, well, you don't even know how to play a piano. He said, yeah, but he got a piano. So they said about to burn everything down in Rosewood.
Right.
And that scene, when we see these scenes, we're getting an insight that is fictionalized, but it's real. So what we're seeing, my feeling, what we're seeing in the White House, not only is he has a mania against Obama, but this guy talks about going to war with people. And when you drop an atomic bomb, and they make this thing sound as though it's divorced from people here in the United States. When you drop an atomic bomb or some atomic device, the radiation is going to travel.
Right.
They are so demonic that they gave American troops, what do you call it, spent uranium, the
Depleted uranium.
Depleted uranium in the weapons, in the bullets that they were firing, and the bombs that were being dropped in Iraq. So here the soldiers, the American soldiers, come back with this depleted uranium in their system the same way brothers came back from Vietnam with Agent Blue and Agent Orange.
Right.
And the only person to talk about this in the media was Juan Gonzalez in the Daily News. He had interviewed maybe 6 soldiers from different backgrounds and how their babies have been born deformed. So when you have somebody who's talking, if they come out of this agreement, we're going to do this and that. He talks like a gangster.
That's what he is.
And I ain't
Exactly what
disagreeing
he is.
this time.
I mean, I've been saying that since day one.
Day one.
But you know, he was in cahoots with Coney Island Russian mafia. Come on, he's a New Yorker.
This
I mean,
deep thing, man.
What else can you do? The Italian mafia in Atlantic City. I mean, he's a gangster, pure gangster.
The French premier was speaking today. Necron, I can't pronounce his name. Necron.
Macaroni, the brothers would call him on the corner.
Well spoken and a well structured speech, and he went into things that Trump didn't know about his own country.
That's right.
He went back to the early days of history of France and the United States, the French revolutionary Lafayette, who fought alongside George Washington to help this country obtain their independence. And he just went through history, naming Americans who fought for France in the First World War before the U.S. was involved in the war, and Americans who fought in the Second World War for France before the U.S. was involved in the war. And he came on right up to this agreement with Iran, with the Iranian agreement on the reduction of the nuclear arms. And he said, this is something we can't throw out. He said, because we got involved because of the United States. So how are you going to turn around and say, oh, we want to tear this up, and you're the ones that brought us in? He said that in the speech today. So he is very level-headed, and it was interesting to see the entire Congress of the United States repeatedly standing and applauding this French premier. All right? Something you don't see here with this guy. And he made it very clear. You know, we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. If anything, we're going to keep this and build upon it because it runs for a number of years. So we can tweak it, but we're not about to throw this out. He says we don't have to agree on everything, but we must work together. And he talked about the environment. He said, you can't be so busy about making money and doing stuff that you're killing your future generations to produce a planet that is inhabitable. He said, so the U.S. has to come back to the table and work on ecology and things that are going to be of a blessing to the planet. And all that tough talk, you know, we're the only country that use nuclear weapons. So who the hell are we to tell Iran or anybody else what they can and cannot have? And we're the only ones that have used nuclear weapons, and we use them against yellow people.
People of color.
We didn't use them against white people in Germany. We used them against yellow people in Japan. It is very interesting.
Well, that was Truman.
It was Truman, yeah.
You know.
So
They didn't think they were human.
And the whole thing about Pearl Harbor, the background history on that, there's a lot to discuss on that in terms of the attack and how that went down. It's not the Johnny Appleseed story that we've been hearing. But it was interesting hearing from the French premier today.
All right, Clemson, before we bring you on, I want to go back to our subject matter of today. You know, the many lies that we hear all the time, and someone's talking about Tawana Brawley. I had an interesting conversation with a good old friend of mine, well, a relative actually, and they're arguing about how it was a hoax. And so I thought I'd bring the subject up today to really give you a good idea of 1987 and Tawana Brawley. Let's run the first roll-in before we talk to Clemson. This is a piece by Clemson, all right? So roll the piece and we'll come right back at you.
This is Dutchess County, New York. It is one of the wealthiest counties in the United States of America, and consequently one of the most powerful counties in the country as well. It is the home of IBM headquarters, the Texaco Research Center, the Vanderbilt family and estate, and the Roosevelt family and estate. Here lies the grave and tombstone of the late President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the godfather of the New Deal liberal doctrine and his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. This family still remains affectionately embedded in the hearts and souls of the American people in particular, and the Western world in general. And in the midst of Dutchess County's wealth and international prominence exists one of the most explosive, racially charged cases in the annals of America's history. On November the 28th, 1987, a 15-year-old African-American female by the name of Tawana Brawley was found unconscious and in a garbage bag in the backyard of her family's former address in the Pavilion Condominium Complex in Wappingers Falls. Wappingers Falls is located in Dutchess County, New York. In addition to have been found unconscious and in a garbage bag, Tawana was also found with cotton stuffed in her nose and ears, KKK and nigger bitch scrawled over her body, and dog feces smeared on her being as well. According to Tawana, on November the 24th, 1987, approximately 8:30 p.m., she got off a short line bus in front of this Mobile service station, which is located on Route 9 in Wappingers Falls. As the bus proceeded north on Route 9, she walked across Route 9 and onto Middlebush Road. As she proceeded to walk across Middlebush Road toward home, a green four-door car pulled up next to her. A white man, about 6 feet tall, jumped out of the car, flashed a badge, and forced her into the car. But when she resisted, she was struck on the head and thrown into the car, and she was taken into a wooded area where she was raped and sodomized. This morbid and atrocious crime, perpetrated against Tawana, triggered off one of the most uncompromising militant movements to ever sweep this country.
Come on, Debbie. Debbie. Welcome back. Well, that's Tawana Brawley. That's, wow. Now, this lie still prevails today. And that's your footage. You actually shot that? Mm-hmm. That's your stuff. So tell us about Tawana and the lies that have prevailed all this time.
Did you say lies?
The lies.
Because I didn't find anything.
No, they say it was a hoax.
Yeah, I didn't find anything about the Tawana story as Tawana and her family related that story to be a lie.
Okay.
In fact, from the time it happened, I went to Poughkeepsie. We spent days in Poughkeepsie filming. We filmed everybody that was involved, from the ambulance personnel who arrived on the scene and who treated Tawana, to the hospital nurse where she was taken, to the police who interviewed her, and just all of the people involved, the postman who saw Bogonis, a person looking like Bogonis, and others in a car riding around where Tawana lived as if they were looking for her. Now, let me say, that scene in here with that dumpster, we interviewed the people who lived right across the street from that dumpster, who was saying that about 5 a.m. in the morning, they had saw a car which was identical to the car that had been described as the car in which Tawana was put in, back up to that dumpster. And they remained there for some time. And they, the couple who lived across the street said that they stopped looking, but later on they came back and the car was gone. Tawana said that because she was in and out of consciousness, that she heard one of the persons who was apparently taking her out of the car and putting her in that dumpster. You guys are crazy. We don't have to kill her. And she said she actually heard that. And they put her in the dumpster, and she noticed she was put in the dumpster because of the way, you know, it felt, you know, uneasy. And later on, she believes that somebody came back and took her out of that dumpster. And we believe that was Chris. Who was later killed. Right. And so she...
Which they said he committed suicide.
Yeah, they said he committed suicide, but we believe that he was murdered and not suicide because he did not go along with the story. Right. And we believe that it was him who took her out of that dumpster. And the people in the pavilion said that they saw Tawana hopping, you know, in the backyard and then fell on the ground where she was unconscious when the ambulance got there, because they, I think, called the ambulance and so forth.
I saw the interview with the doctor, too.
Yeah. So we believe that because she lived down there. They had moved, but that was where they lived. So we think that she was trying to get to familiar, you know, environment,
Well,
and
did
she hopped down.
And did these cops actually know her, to know where to bring her to? How did they know to bring her to the old house where she once lived?
Well, that I don't really know why they brought her there, but the dumpster would have been picked up that day, that morning, and so she would have disappeared in the garbage. Right. So, and that whole area is tight, so, you know, you're not that far from everything.
Okay.
Pagonis had lived in that development at some time. At the time that, as I recall, at the time that Tawana's family lived there, Pagonis had been living there.
So he
knew the area, and he knew her.
He had seen her, yes.
He had seen her before. You know, Tawana was an A student. She was an honor student, and she was an athlete.
And she was a very religious person, and she was the queen of the choir. There was a singing group in which she participated in. She was their queen and so forth. So she was, you know, she was not a wayward, loose child. Right. She was a very...
But she was a 15-year-old and very healthy.
Very healthy, well-developed. She ran track, good-looking young lady.
Looked like a grown woman.
And there was another thing we found out from investigating the case, that Pagonis and those men had been to a strip club
the night before.
That same night.
Drinking, and they were ready for action
right.
when they left the strip club. One of the interesting things in it is that that same morning that Tawana was found, Pagonis, Chris, and I think it was one or two other
There was a guy from the New York State Police. As a matter of fact, his father was a lieutenant that served Governor, not Carey, who followed Carey? He was on, the Pataki. Mm-hmm. Pataki. He was on Governor Pataki's bodyguard detail. Mm-hmm. The father of one of these police officers, as I recall.
Okay.
And everybody had somebody that was higher up. Pagonis' father was a judge. Chris didn't have anybody. He was a local cop. from Wappinger Falls. But the other guys were state troopers, and they had connections with the state police and with the governor. So, not to jump ahead, but well, I'll go back to the ambulance. I don't want to go ahead, but you remember the findings from the ambulance attendants when they found her, what they said in the trial?
They gave on a scale of, I think it was
1 to 4.
1 to 10.
1
The
to
scale was
7.
1 to 10 is good health, but they gave her a 3.
2.5.
3.
Yeah.
So 1 to 4.
Yeah, and the ambulance driver determined, I mean, they did their investigation, and the, I forgot his name, who spoke for Slocum Willem Ambulance Service. He said that he believes that Tawana was telling the truth. They know that she was unconscious. They did all of the pretext to determine if she was conscious or unconscious. She was unconscious, and that she was in a state where they had to get her to the hospital. But getting back to that morning, these police officers, including Chris, they say now, this came out in the trial, the defamation trial, which you was at. It was the longest defamation trial in
But
the
this
history.
is 10 years after.
This is 10 years after,
Okay.
but that's
The
where a
defamation
lot of
trial.
the facts came out in that trial. Even though we had already heard that, and we knew that they were talking about Pagonis 1 or 2 hours before Tawana. They were talking about Tawana 1 or 2 hours before Tawana was found, before the ambulance got there, before anybody knew anything about Tawana having been assaulted, raped, and left there in that bag with shit, dog shit smeared all over, nigger bitch. And so the conversation in the car was, did you hear about the girl?
This was between who and who?
This was between
Pagonis
Chris, Pagonis, and the police officers that you
The
were
state
alluding
guys
to.
from the state police. There
I think it was 4 of them.
there was a Latino brother too. The guy that we brought down from upstate, had him produced. Was he? Remember the guy that was produced, had him brought down to testify. He testified against Pagonis.
Okay, yes.
All right, let me do
But
this.
no, this is important because here they are discussing Tawana Brawley 2 hours before Tawana Brawley was found, that there was any information. How did they know that there had been a girl found in a bag of shit with nigger bitch wrote all over her? And in that car on the way to Danbury, it is said that Chris pulled his .357 Magnum,
No, he had a 38.
had a 38,
Yeah, 38.
and put it to Pagonis' head and threatened to blow his head off.
Really?
So here you got, and the next day you find Chris dead, supposedly of a suicide, self-inflicted wound. Now all of this is court records. I mean, and I have Pagonis on film because every day after we was up there. I mean, there was a group that came from New York. We took a bus up there for every day for 9 months. I drove 100 miles up and 100 miles back to the trial every day for 9 months to film this trial because I had been filming it since the incident happened in 1987, I believe it was. So they asked Pagonis about it, and he said, yeah, well, Chris did stuff like that. You know, yes, he did. He pulled his gun out, but he didn't point it at me. He pointed it towards me, something to that order. Now, he admits this, on tape that they were talking about Tawana and so forth.
Okay.
Now, and you got to understand that Pagonis was a suspect before Sharpton and Maddox and all of them got involved. All that came out in the trial. But you have to also look at who we're dealing with. You're dealing with the children, some of the high officials and political leaders in Dutchess County.
Okay.
And if you look at the footage that the police that interviewed Tawana, what was his name?
Tawana was in such a state of shock, she wouldn't allow a white man to come near her. Wouldn't allow it. So they had to find a black police officer. They only had one. I don't remember his name. They brought him to the hospital to talk to her. And she said to him, there was a cop. And she described the cop with his handlebar mustache. When she said it was a cop, the interview went left. See,
he allowed her to interview because she couldn't talk. And he had her to write out what it was that she was saying. And she wrote, and they have, all this was, came out in the trial. There was the paper and everything that she wrote on. She wrote white cop. And the police officer said she was just staring in space. She couldn't talk. As if, you know, it wasn't like she was holding a lucrative conversation. She was half here and half not here. So she, from the very beginning, wrote that when he asked who did this, and she wrote white cop. So, I mean, the documentary is very detailed, and all of this is in the documentary, but of course I did that documentary 20 years ago, and Chris just called me, Gilchrist, Brother Gilchrist here, and said he wanted to talk about it because of the anniversary. But I haven't looked at that documentary in years and years and years, so all of this is generated from my memory, but you can pull up the documentary on YouTube.
To keep the public up to what you're exposed to in the media, here's a piece, the second piece on Tawana Brawley. And this is what the media did. Now, we have actual people actually there. Now, and these are eyewitnesses to the occurrence. All right? They were on the case. But half of this occurred 10 years later during the defamation trial. All right, so play that second piece and we'll come right back at you.
Tawana Brawley is a 16-year-old girl whose story is the talk of New York these days.
The New York State teenager who claims that she was abducted and raped by 6 white men.
In the late 1980s, Tawana Brawley became a household name as her horrific stories spread across the nation.
She had KKK written across her chest and nigger across her stomach.
Leading to widespread outrage.
We're going to expose the facts in these crimes that you do against black people.
And intense soul-searching about race in America.
Let Miss Brawley represent what we're not going to stand for as parents, as Americans, and as human beings.
But how did investigators discover the truth behind the Brawley rape, and what is its legacy today?
I think that the lessons of Brawley is very instructive for me and others, but I think that people want to cut off the lessons where they want.
In November 1987, a news story from a small town 70 miles north of New York City shocked the nation.
Special segment tonight, the Tawana Brawley case.
She was found wrapped in a plastic bag, by some accounts, sexually assaulted.
The 16-year-old cheerleader said she'd been abducted 4 days earlier and had been repeatedly raped and sodomized.
She was found in a fairly frightening state. She had a pair of sneakers which had been cut with a razor. Her hair seemed matted and covered with feces. There was writing on her chest. The jeans that she had were burnt in the crotch. It was like this is not a normal state to find someone.
More unsettling was the claim Brawley made on national television about one of her attackers.
He's a cop. He was a police officer.
Brawley attracted a team of activists to her side. The Reverend Al Sharpton, C. Vernon Mason, and Alton Maddox were well known in the press, having recently focused attention on another racially charged case, the killing of a black youth who was fleeing a white mob in Howard Beach, Queens.
New York State is now the capital of racial violence.
In the Brawley case, they saw the makings of a cover-up and demanded a special prosecutor take over.
I was a spokesman for the legal team and the family of Miss Brawley. I was involved to help bring light on the fact that there was a situation that needed to be adjudicated.
We are not going to let this girl be the scapegoat of a corrupt system. We want to show the world how low down, dongus, and callous the state of New York is.
Brawley's advisors declared they had a suspect, a young police officer named Harry Christ Jr., who had committed suicide days after her attack.
The media now has released that Tawana identified Chris.
What's the evidence, Sage?
Tawana's voice on the tape identifying Chris.
With protesters taking to the streets, the state attorney general dispatched veteran investigator John Ryan to upstate New York, with orders to solve the increasingly sensitive case.
We attempted immediately to sit down with Tawana and her family, and we reached out repeatedly to her attorneys, her advisors, and that was never fruitful.
Her lawyers, it was their decision, along with her family, which I announced, that they did not want to cooperate because they did not trust the special prosecutor that was appointed by the governor.
We might send them a letter, and then, they'd have a press conference.
They're at a press conference, and all of a sudden, Alton Maddox pops out with this guy's name.
Her lawyers charged that Dutchess County Assistant District Attorney Stephen Pagonis was among the girl's attackers and demanded his arrest.
We have the facts and the evidence that an assistant district attorney and a state trooper did this.
She made statements to the lawyer. She never made statements to me. I did not ask a 15-year-old girl what happened. I believe the lawyers believed their client, and I believe that we had an obligation to go forward.
Without Brawley's cooperation, Ryan tried to divine some clues from the initial police investigation.
In the course of the interview with the police, she literally only said one word. She would also indicate, I believe by eye blinks, they would ask her a question and she would indicate yes or no. The police officer took what they could get. She was found in a grassy area behind the building that her family had previously lived in, very near the apartment that was then vacant but unlocked. She had literally just come off being grounded because she got home at 5 in the morning from some party. She goes to visit a boyfriend in jail, and then she eventually takes the bus home, and that's the last time anybody saw her officially.
Interesting.
So, when you're in the presence of someone like Tawana Brawley and her family, and we followed the clues to everything, wherever they said she was, we went there to check it, to see if she was really there. And what we found out that nobody could place Tawana Brawley anywhere during those 4 days that she was abducted. Everywhere they claimed she was when we went there, like they claimed that she went to a party. We went to the people who gave the party, and they said, no, she wasn't here. And we interviewed a number of people. I mean, we interviewed everybody that had any relationship with that case, and most of it you'll find in the documentary. But as you see from what they have just showed you, what we have already laid out is true. Now, that said that Tawana was lying. What was his name?
Are you talking about
the reporter?
The district attorney, not the district
Abrams?
attorney. Robert Abrams. Robert Abrams
Attorney
covered
General.
all of that up, and all you got to do is look at what's happening right now within the Trump administration to see how vicious and aisle full of lies and, you know, people who cover up for each other and who protect their children. And they have the power to do that. And so that's really what they did. And Robert Abrams was just a part of that cover-up.
Right.
He was a part of that, and all of that comes out very clearly. But this is one of the most interesting cases of rape of a black child, because you had the entire black community, not that all of them agreed that Tawana had been raped, but they certainly all responded for the most part. And I was happy to see how black men turned out, from Minister Louis Farrakhan, Bill Cosby, all. So, you know, people felt the resonance, and the City Sun did an in-depth piece.
Gilchrist lead
on the findings of the hospital, which said that Tawana Brawley was raped.
Right.
And, you know, but when you have people in power and their children
But why was there
involved.
any doubt about this?
I don't know. I had no doubt from the time that I began doing the story. I never had
The moment
doubt
that she indicated there was a cop involved, that police officer got up and left the room. I don't remember his name.
The black guy.
The black cop got up and left the room and went to report back. She's saying a cop did it. Everything did a 90-degree angle turn at that point, because she's saying it's a cop. Interestingly enough, Harry Christ, it was his car
Oh, it was his car.
that she was
Okay.
abducted in.
Okay.
She described Chris. Chris winds up dead a couple of days later. Stephen Pagonis was a misdemeanor assistant DA. He didn't try major felony crimes. He did misdemeanors. He was a piss-poor law student at best. So he was assigned to misdemeanor cases in Dutchess County. When they found that a cop had...
No, Pagonis wasn't a cop.
No,
He was
he was an assistant district attorney.
Ah, okay.
His name was first announced in the case by Supreme Court Justice Judith Hillary. A judge said that Pagonis was a suspect. Not Maddox, not Mason, not Sharpton. A New York State Supreme Court judge said that Pagonis was a suspect and he should take a leave of absence from the DA's office.
And that was based on what?
I don't know how she got that information.
But she said it.
She was the one that said it first. She was never sued. She was never sued. But with the, I lost my train of thought when I went to Judith Hillary. Harry Christ.
Okay.
He winds up dead a couple of days later. Pagonis is at the New York State barracks, New York State Police barracks, when they get a notification that a cop has committed suicide back in Wappinger Falls. And he says, well, what happened? Oh, a cop committed suicide. Where? What's his name? It's Harry Christ. He said, that's my buddy. Can I ride with you guys? Now, when there's a homicide or a suicide, they have what's called a riding DA. A riding ADA comes to the scene to make sure everything is handled right, so that in the event the perpetrator is caught, the case is done, the evidence, everything is recovered properly. He rides with the state police to Wappinger Falls. I don't know what he was doing at that troop, but he said, that's my friend. That's what they said. He was, that's my friend. He goes to the crime scene, which he has no business at.
Okay.
He's a misdemeanor ADA. They report that he has committed suicide. The other trooper who was with them, and I can't remember his name, is the one that allegedly found Harry Christ in his house. He lived upstairs from his aunt, as I recall. Now, the trooper said he went back to Harry's house because he had been there with him. They were lifting weights. And he took his wedding band off. When he was working with the weights, he didn't want to dent the band. And he went back to retrieve his wedding band. Interesting enough, Harry Christ had no weights in his house. So you couldn't have been weightlifting with Harry Christ in his house. And he doesn't own any barbells. Then Harry Crist was shot with a .357 Magnum. Harry Crist owned a .38 Special. He didn't own a .357 Magnum. The state trooper owned a .357 Magnum. And Stephen Pagonis owned a .357 Magnum. The round was recovered from his skull. The weight, everything indicated .357. How does Harry Crist shoot himself with a .357 Magnum that he doesn't own? And how does Harry Crist get rid of the weapon that he killed himself with after he's killed himself? These were the questions that we were presenting in the case. And it's because of this guy that I wound up mixed up in this case. No, he called me. I have just retired. He called me up. And I spent 8 months. We went every day, back and forth. And these were some of the challenges that Alton was dealing with in the case. And everybody said he committed suicide. The family, for 10 years, believed that he had committed suicide.
Oh, really?
Up until the defamation.
Up until the defamation trial. They believed that he had committed suicide. So Alton was saying...
What was the reason for committing suicide?
That's what they were told by the medical examiner.
Oh,
all right? No. But what happens is, in this matter, Alton is demanding to see the crime scene photos, which they would not surrender. He said, I want to see the crime scene photos, because he knew that Pagonis had a gun put to his head by the man who is now dead. And Pagonis owned a .357 Magnum. And how do you get rid of the gun that you shot yourself with? All these holes are here, but the public doesn't know it. So in attempting to get the paperwork, they finally gave Alton one Polaroid photo. He says, Spoon, I gotta know, because I want to call in the medical examiner. I don't want to call him in if he's going to give me information that's not going to help. So I looked at the picture. They wouldn't give him the crime scene photos. They gave him a picture of Harry Crist laying in the morgue. And I said, Alton, this is a homicide. He said, wait a minute. I said, it's a homicide, Alton. Trust me, this is what I do. This is a homicide. This is not a suicide, self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was shot at close range. There was a scar over his left breast. I said, that's from the front side of the gun. Somebody was attempting to take him out. There was a struggle, but he was shot at close range. If you're going to shoot yourself, you have to bring, I don't want to give out too much information because somebody with the wrong idea. What I would look for in that type of self-inflicted gunshot wound was not there. It was just a bullet hole. So Alton called in the medical examiner. He said, what is the classification of this? He said, is this a self-inflicted gunshot wound? He said, no. And you hear a murmur. He said, well, what is it?
This in the court?
In the court. He said, this is not a suicide. He said, this is a homicide. The place went crazy. Harry Crist's family got up. They were sitting with Pagonis. They got up and came and sat on our side of the courtroom looking at Pagonis' family. And it was that one Polaroid photo that gave us the ability to establish that fact, that this police officer did not commit suicide, but he was a victim of a homicide, which to this day has not been solved. They have not pursued, and he was not the only cop murdered in Dutchess County. While I was up there, I was investigating another case where a cop was murdered, thrown into the Hudson River. And Michael Baden, the quote-unquote pathologist, who declared that Tawana had not been sexually assaulted, and he never examined Tawana Brawley. He never met her. He wouldn't know if she was standing in front of her. Michael Baden can be paid by anybody to say anything they want in a case. And in the other case I was checking into while I was up there, you cannot die of drowning and there's no water in your lungs. Michael Baden declared that this cop who was murdered accidentally drowned. He didn't drown. He didn't drown.
A completely separate case?
Separate case, but the things that were going on in Dutchess County, you might as well be in Alabama in 1955.
Okay, all right.
So we had, remember the FBI agent that was called in? There was a female FBI agent called in.
Yes, that's right. And matter of fact, she had an affair, I believe, with Pagonis.
There you go. So this is the network. You see, so she's protecting him. She was a girlfriend or a relative or something.
Well, she was assigned to the case?
Yeah. She came in to do some
and
work.
she's a girlfriend of Pagonis.
Girlfriend
she's
or a relative, one or the other. No, she's protecting Pagonis.
I think she was a girlfriend.
So Alton wanted to get
her connection to the case?
She's protecting Pagonis. She came in to do some investigative work, all right? But she's not coming up with any factual information that's going to implicate Pagonis or these guys.
Okay.
So Alton wanted to get her in to testify. She said, I don't have to respond to a state subpoena. He said, we can't get this girl in. I said, let me make a call. So I called somebody I know.
Go ahead.
I called a buddy of mine who happened to be the first deputy commissioner of NYPD, a good friend, John Pritchard III. John, I need your help. What's up? We need an FBI agent up here tomorrow. I need you to call Louis Freeh. Louis Freeh was the national director of the FBI at this time. I said, we need this agent in court tomorrow. Now, Louis was not involved. Louis was not the FBI director at the time of the rape and the sodomization of Tawana. I said, but if she's not in court, then we're going to drag Louis into this mess for trying to protect her. All right? Straight up. John called Louis, and guess who came to court the next day? That agent came to court. See, and this is how a lot of things work with the connections that people have, whether it's pro or con. You know, Alton was trying to get this woman in court for months. And sometimes it's just a phone call. And that's why relationships are important. And I'm not boasting.
Did it make any difference her being in court?
Well, it was established that there was a relationship between the two of them in court.
Right.
And the general press, the Times, the News, the Post, nobody was reporting what was going on in court on a daily basis. Dunleavy, who used to write for the Post, who was a drunkard, Dunleavy was out drinking, and he'd ask other reporters what happened and help them prepare.
Let me show this other case.
Let me say this while it's on my mind. The one thing that all through this trial we tried to get was the FBI report on Pagonis, because the FBI was investigating Pagonis for some time, and then they just closed that file. They stopped at one point investigating Pagonis, and it was not because they found that he was innocent or anything like that. It was because that's, you know, the kind of power that Pagonis and his family had, and they just closed that investigation. But we tried, Alton did, for the whole length of that trial to get, and still, even to this day, that's a part of what Alton and Mason and Sharpton were trying to get, is the FBI file on Pagonis, because that would reveal exactly why he was under investigation and everything dealing with that for that period of time.
The trooper that came down, the guy that was produced, I don't remember his name, he's a Latino brother. He said he was a former state trooper. He was serving time.
Wasn't he in jail?
He was in jail, had him produced.
I remember
yeah,
now.
he was
Yes,
produced. They brought him
yes,
from upstate down to the trial. He said, I've committed numerous crimes for the Pagonis family.
Wow.
He came down.
So all of these people out here is talking about Tawana lied and everything. Tawana did not lie.
Well, let's show, let me show this other clip. Show that fourth clip, next to the last one. These show you what the media does with all these innuendos. All right?
My name is Tawana Brawley. All right. I'm not a liar and I'm not crazy.
It was 1987. Tawana Brawley was a 15-year-old who claimed she was raped by 6 white men in law enforcement. And Al Sharpton took up her cause. But there was no forensic evidence of any sexual attack, and there was evidence Tawana made up the whole story. The case, labeled a hoax, was dismissed, and Sharpton was forced to pay $65,000 to those he had named. But in all this time, he has never voiced any regret. You have gone back and looked at things with such a clear eye. You've apologized, you've asked for forgiveness, except on Tawana Brawley. I don't get it.
I'll be honest with you. I have thought about that a million times. I just don't believe they treated that case fair.
If I knew that I had in any way contributed to falsely accusing someone, I think I would feel an obligation to say I'm sorry.
I think you're right. I think the operative word is if you knew that. I don't know that.
If they didn't do
But
it,
but suppose they
you're
did.
taking the,
Suppose they did.
but they didn't. They didn't.
This is not the Central Park jogger case, man.
You know what I mean?
You know?
They're so convinced. How did Leslie Stahl get so convinced that they didn't do it?
The media.
I mean, what is
Not
this?
only that, it was in their interest to how many white men have been convicted for raping a black woman?
A black woman.
Thank you.
I mean, millions of black women have been raped
Wow.
since our people been here by white men. That's all white men did at one time. As a matter of fact, that's a part of Make America Great Again.
Ooh.
That white men will have access to all of the sex that they want from black women. That was when America was great.
Look at the shades
all,
of black here.
all of this. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Right?
but through all this period, I doubt if you got 3 white men in the history of blacks in America that have been convicted for raping our mothers over the past 350 years that we've been here. And yet,
say this.
millions upon millions of them were raped. Every sexual encounter was a rape deal.
Men and boys
Children.
and girls raped by them. From the slave ships all the way over here continued. These are not normal people. But the thing about Leslie Stahl, your question, how is she convinced? She's reading from a script. She's a cleanup woman. Remember that woman, the cleanup woman?
Yeah.
She's a cleanup woman. They use a female. Now,
This is
how to
60
handle
minutes.
how to handle an interview like that? Look at Minister Farrakhan and Mike
Douglas in 60 Minutes?
60 Minutes. What's his name? Mike Douglas.
Mike Douglas, yeah.
The late.
Late Mike Douglas.
Look at Minister Farrakhan being interviewed by him as it relates to Nigeria, and then you see how you deal with an accusation from somebody who's positioning you as though you're the liar.
Right.
Alton, here's the thing I haven't been able to understand, and I asked Alton, and Alton is, before I say that, look, what you're showing here on the Gilchrist experience is so invaluable. It's so invaluable, and it shows the importance and the value of, quote, black media, end quote. But it also is an indictment on Negroes who have cable shows who don't do nothing with them. This is very critical. What you're showing here, I'm a spectator. I'm looking like this, listening to you, Graham.
These guys were there.
Okay.
They were
but
there.
The thing is, the cover down. We call it covering down. That's the military term. You cover down. You have all these cover down artists, and they're paid. They are actually assets. They're paid. Get so and so to do this. Abrams, the media, E.R. Ship. These people, Mike Taibbi. These people have made money off of promoting this case as being an untruth.
Yeah. You know, Pagonis's wife, at the conclusion of this trial, she sat through the whole trial. She also is an attorney.
Pagonis was
his
there.
wife. How could Tawana Brawley know where Pagonis spent his Thanksgiving dinner? How could she know that? Unless she was in the company and earshot of Stephen Pagonis and his boys, and they're talking while she's in and out of consciousness. How could a 15-year-old girl know where you spent Thanksgiving dinner and who you were with? When this trial was over, Our Time Press published the whole story. We put together the whole thing, and we took that publication from Brooklyn and deposited it on every doorstep of every house in Wappinger Falls, all around, starting with his house all the way around. So everybody would get the real story that wasn't published. His wife took the children and left. Because when Stanton, Pagonis's lawyer, I'm going to read we got the report here from the hospital, and this defamation and lying, Sharpton match. And he starts reading the medical report from the hospital. He had to stop and look at his own client as though, you lying son of a. He wanted to put it away. No, no, no. You opened it up, you read it. Her medical condition, the chlamydia, the inflammation around her pubic area from the pounding. All right? Everything was documented in the medical report, and that Times article said that the evidence shows that she's lying. All right? His wife got up and left with the children. When the trial was over, she was done with him. She was done. All right? We had some knucklehead, remember the guy took at gunpoint in the street?
Oh, yeah. We had action now.
I had to take the guy down at gunpoint in the street. And he's there instigating something in a press conference. I noticed he's got shotgun shells in his cargo pockets. So he's mad because a black woman told him to shut his mouth. They're trying to work. Bitch. He turns it, he's heading out to go. I guess he's going to his car. You ain't making it, buddy. I took him down in the street at gunpoint.
Yeah.
The guy had earlier that day threatened to kill Bill Clinton. The Secret Service came to the courthouse and picked that guy up. They were in town looking for him. And he was at our press conference.
There was so much that went on and that was going on up there. It was like, I mean, I'll never forget the experience because it was 9 months that we was there every day from morning to night and filming everything. So I would ask people to go on YouTube and bring up the Tawana Brawley story. And let me say this one.
We might do some more.
It's by Transatlantic Productions.
TAP.
For some reason, I had a massive heart attack, so I'm gonna put on the massive heart attack. And I can't remember my partner's name. You hear him in the tape. Do you remember his name?
I can't remember his name.
And he is the person doing the narration, and I just want to give him credit for an incredible job.
I got to sign off to the
together.
Manhattan part. Thank you for coming. The God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more powerful things.
If you move to the Bronx, you can get the last minute.
All the stuff. All right? God bless. Take care. Power to the people.
Man.
Continue. You can't remember his name.
I can't. I thought it.
But he does a great job.
And I just, because I wanted to give him credit.
It's in the credits. You didn't put his name in the credits?
It's in the credits.
Oh, okay. Well, you can't remember it now.
That's
right.
what I'm telling
people
people
can access what you did by going to YouTube and putting in what?
Tawana Brawley documentary, Transatlantic Productions.
Make sure it says Transatlantic Productions.
Yeah,
that's the one you want.
Put it on YouTube, it'll pop up. Just put Tawana Brawley in there, it'll come up.
Oh, that's
why I get all this stuff.
Oh, okay. So you actually saw it up there?
Oh, yeah, it's up there.
Okay, okay.
I took it down. That's why I got the, well, you think I get this
He sent
footage?
it to me this morning. I was like,
okay.
Well, you know, we've had an interesting one. Here's a case that I argue with a lot of people about.
Are we off camera?
No, we're still on.
We're still on, but we're about to leave, and I got 10 seconds.
Okay.
Again, God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more powerful presentation of our history. God bless. Power to the people.